Okay, I've been told to use the microphone, so good morning everybody and welcome to the SafeWater training workshop. Thank you very much to Lita and all of her team for hosting the event, for the recording, for everything that you've done. I know it's a huge amount of work and we're all very grateful. So today is part of our capacity and capability building training. So it's not a formal lecture. It's not a case where people can do their email on their computer. We're all here to learn a little bits about the different disciplines that are represented by the SafeWater project. And it's hugely important, as we mention at all of the presentations about the project, the technology is only one small element of the SafeWater project. The training, the capacity building, the sharing of knowledge, the networking is as important for the funders, to be honest, more important to the funders than the development of the technology. So this afternoon, before we start the session, we will circulate a little sort of questionnaire to ask about your opinions and your level of knowledge before the presentations. And then again, we will repeat the exercise after, because we have to assess and we have to measure whether the training has been effective and help the participants to learn a little bit more about these different interdisciplinary areas. So we have two themes for the workshops at this meeting in Brazil. One is on enterprise and the second is on applied microbiology. Okay, so again, total opposite ends of the spectrum, but that's the purpose, so that technical people can learn a little bit about the importance of the enterprise and creating impact from the project, but also that the people from the social sciences background can learn a little bit about the microbiology, the virology, and the parasitology that goes on within the project. Nobody is expected, well, apart from those giving the presentations, nobody is expecting you to become an expert listening and participating in a 1-hour event. That's not the purpose. The purpose is that you gain some general knowledge about the topic and that you feel comfortable then to talk about that as part of the larger SafeWater discussions. Okay, so it's important that we all participate, and the events have been designed not to be a lecture. Okay, most of the events will be small focus groups and some information that's being shared, and we will have discussions, not university lectures. We will have visits to the laboratory, so you can see some of the techniques and experience some of the complexity of the microbiology within the project. And as you know, we will visit, have a teamwork and a networking event where we'll go and visit some locations during the week as well. So the sheet of paper that you've got is just a summary of the workshops associated with the enterprise section. Do not think there is nothing this afternoon. There is another sheet of paper that will be the microbiology session this afternoon and tomorrow afternoon. Does anybody any questions? Everybody understands? Perfect. Okay, I'm going to hand over to the Master of Ceremonies. He's going to introduce the first speaker.
Okay, Professor Michael Brennan, the first issue today, with the first issue, your research and GCRF. Professor Brennan, please.
Thank you very much. So this session is an interactive session, so I'm going to ask some questions and then I'm going to pick on some people to answer those questions, because it's actually quite a challenge to engage with an audience which is made up of such a diverse group of people. So we have some distinguished professors who are experts in their particular disciplines. We also have people who are working on SafeWater from NGOs who are very keen and interested in practice. We have some PhDs who are studying research. So it's a very diverse group of people, and to try to pitch a message to you is quite difficult. So what I'm going to do is just talk about three issues. The first one is about impact, and certainly for funders in the UK and Europe and the States and South America, the idea that public money is being used to fund research is fine, but it's now very clear that the funders demand tangible impact in some way, which is a challenge because for academics, impact is by academic papers. You write papers. I got a paper accepted in June. I was very happy about it. It took an awful long time to do it. But for funders, they are more interested in developing capability and capacity and actually making some sort of impact. And that's a problem as well, because the definition of impact, there is no definition of impact, because in the UK we do an exercise every several years where we try to understand academic impact. And one of the things that has changed over time is academic papers by themselves, whilst important, are becoming less important. And what's becoming very clear is the need to have case studies and examples of things that have actually made a tangible impact or change with a group of people. So that's a change, and for many academics, they will ignore that. Many academics I deal with will say that's not of interest to me. I don't get promoted on talking with problems owners or going out into the community. I do my papers, I do my research, and I get promotion on the basis of that. So the fact of the matter is there's now a disconnect, I think, between academia and writing academic papers and actually having an impact on society. People may disagree with me, but that's my perception of that. To give you an example, when I did my PhD, I was told to look for a gap in my discipline. My discipline was business and management. So when I was doing a PhD, my supervisor said, just look for a gap that no one else has explored or researched. Now, in transdisciplinary research, you don't start with a gap in a discipline's knowledge base. You start with a problem. And a problem is something that's real to people in society. So the fact about that is that problems can be perceived as existing on lots of different dimensions. So SafeWater, whilst it is a technical problem, it's also a social problem. And that's when I say that to my colleagues in Ulster University, they think I'm mad. They say, how is water a social problem? But it is. So that's the challenge that we're trying to engage with SafeWater, and especially impact and TD, or transdisciplinarity. One of the other things I've learned from being on the project is that there are multiple forms of knowledge. So typically in science or engineering, this is my perception, knowledge is discovered. So you discover knowledge, whereas from a social science perspective, if you don't discover knowledge, how do you engage with knowledge, do you think? If it isn't discovered, what do? You construct knowledge. You construct knowledge. Now, when I said that to my science colleagues are raising their eyes as I speak. So the idea that there are multiple forms of knowledge as well as scientific knowledge is a very important idea. And if that's the one lesson or idea that you take away from this morning's session, it's that there are multiple forms of knowledge. So that's the key point. There's a very famous book published in 1994 by a group of academics led by a guy called Michael Gibbons, called The New Production of Knowledge. And he talked about Mode 1 knowledge, which is scientific knowledge. And they talked about Mode 2 knowledge, which is knowledge that's produced on the basis of practice. And they were arguing that those two types of knowledge are as legitimate as each other. So that's one of the things I've noticed in doing this work, is that scientists and engineers are very, very clear about the parameters of what they're doing, and it fits in with their 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 gaps in their knowledge. But I think things like SafeWater are much more complex, and I think the appreciation of the complexity is an important thing for us to come away with. Any questions about that, or thoughts or observations?
Is that like Facebook taking all of our data and then selling and creating other opportunities? They haven't developed, they're creating that opportunity by gathering information.
Yeah, I think that's it. The idea is that in our work, we create opportunities. I mean, one of the things in entrepreneurship, which I teach, is that do you actually find an opportunity or do you create an opportunity? So it seems like a philosophical question, but it's fundamental to how we approach doing things. Because I'll give you an example. It was mentioned yesterday that one of the easiest and simplest ways to produce safe water is by the use of chlorine. And yet, that's unacceptable in social settings. Now, what happens is scientists that I've spoken to in my university say that's a problem of adherence. You must insist that the person accepts chlorine as a solution to their safe water problem. Now, that's a very difficult thing to do because people won't accept that. People may through education, but I think it's sometimes a good idea to ask people before you start the process of doing it what is it that's important for them. And I noticed from a number of presentations yesterday, the red carpet example was a very interesting one, where farmers or people in agriculture, it's a very difficult thing to convince them to do things. Now, one of the things that we've been doing is about the idea of a typology of users. So you have different types of farmers. Some farmers will be very welcoming of assistance and do that. Other farmers will be very suspicious. So the idea is if you can identify different typologies or different types of farmers in their acceptance of a solution, you can then wrap around that solution around the same technology. And that's what we do in business and management. It's called market segmentation, where you identify different types of markets or sub-markets, and you try to make sure that what you offer them meets their needs. I'll give you an example. One of the projects I'm doing, just finished with, is about telehealth. So telehealth is where you try to get elderly people remaining in their homes, and if they fall because of a disability, they press an alarm. So what we've worked with companies, and they have invented a technology which can use it as a sort of necklace around your neck. So if the person falls, they can press a big red button and summon assistance. So then when this technology was invented and they go out and try to sell that to your grandfather, what does your grandfather say? No? I don't want a big red button on my shirt to demonstrate that I've got a disability. Now the technology people who developed this said, well, just tell him to wear it. Your grandfather says, I'm not wearing it. And that's where technology, without a value proposition surrounding it, is actually useless. And that's the typology of people where you have to identify different types of people and how they will engage with the technology. The technology by itself is of no use if it isn't used, if the button is sitting there and my grandfather's falling. So that's very, very important. So that's the social side of this, which scientists and engineers might say, well, you just need to teach people or tell them what to do. But that's not the way the world works, I think. And that's what I'm one of the few social scientists on Safe Water. That's what we've been trying to do. And that's captured in this idea of transdisciplinarity, which, as I said yesterday, is a very long word. But it's trying to get the idea that scientists, when they're starting their investigations, and users, when they're articulating their problem, that if they can try to agree some sort of approach or a common research object at the start or evolve it during a process, that means the technology is much more likely to be accepted by different groups of people. So that's really where we're coming from. I'll give you another example. There was a study done in Australia about people who were suffering from cancer, and what they found was that if you try to, the same cancer condition, if you try to profile how they engaged with their medical condition, you could have different types of engagement. Some people wanted to be very proactive and to take control and fight this cancer. Other people didn't want to know, they were in denial, they didn't want to engage with it. Other people, it was their family members, their children, who would act on their behalf. So whilst the doctors or the GPs, the medical advisors, were providing exactly the same medical intervention, it was surrounded by a value proposition that meant that they could cater to those different types of people with the same solution. So that's where I'm coming from. And the main point is that any technology or intervention, I would suggest, has to take into account the social dimension to it. Otherwise, you can be literally wasting money. Any observations on that? Any thoughts?
Exactly like we work at IWRM. When we discuss about social technologies, we have to go to the people, the potential users. We have to go. We have to go to discuss with the potential users to do if they want to apply that.
Yeah.
Because if not, it's if they don't want, we do nothing. We try to convince, but if we don't reach that, it's we don't use any force for that. That's the decision in the last moment is always from the potential user.
Yes, exactly.
That's the constitution.
Well, I was very interested in what you were saying yesterday about the lady that said she wouldn't use the stuff despite the fact you were saying it improves the productivity or the growth of the crops.
That's the value. So
Yeah.
sometimes the value is not by the health, but by the economic aspect.
But have you identified, is she one of a number of types that you've identified? I mean, do some people simply accept your solutions without query or questioning it?
I don't have this number. Do you have this number?
I think we have cases. I think sometimes it happens, like people understand you and they accept what you're saying.
Yes.
And they just start using. And sometimes you went back there and you see that it's working and they are happy, and sometimes you go back and they just abandon.
Yes, exactly.
So we have all kinds of situations, but something that we talked about yesterday was how to keep the monitoring of any kind of
Yes.
system.
Yeah.
And this is the difficulty for, I think, all of us, because we have a time, we have budget, and it ends, and you don't have how to go back there and check like once in a year or for a longer period.
Yeah, and that's the challenge for this, to try to make sure that sustainability of the project happens. So that's where we're coming from now. So that's basically what I'm interested in, but given that it's a workshop, what I like to do is to try to capture some of the perceptions of the people in the group about what we did yesterday, because I observed that we were there for about 8 hours yesterday. There was an awful lot of very valuable and diverse solutions. So what I would ask you to do is to talk to the person beside you and to relate what is the one thing you remember from yesterday. Now, I know people are raising their eyes. I'm looking, people are raising their eyes because this involves some sort of engagement. What one thing did you learn from yesterday that you didn't know at the start of the day? Because some people here are new to the group today, and it's just so that we can capture the key outputs of yesterday. What did we learn? What did you learn? Did you learn nothing? Did you learn one thing? And what was that thing? So do you want to talk to the person beside you? Talk to the people beside you or behind you and tell us, because I'm going to ask people. Okay, so for the benefit of colleagues who have joined us today, most of us sat in the lecture theatre yesterday for several hours listening to a wide range of very interesting and diverse solutions to the water challenge. So what I'd ask you, people who were there, what did you learn from yesterday? So the group at the back, anybody from that? What did you learn? Do you want me to pick on you?
I'm going to ask some help from my friends here because we actually discussed so many different things.
Were you at the sessions yesterday?
Yeah, from yesterday.
Okay, so just on a common sense, off the top of your head, what sort of struck you about, or what occurred to you about?
Mostly about the technology transfer, how hard it is, and how we need to focus on what the user wants before developing the technology. Because the group here is all from academia, a bunch of engineers, so that's it. Sometimes we don't focus on the social before actually thinking about the technology.
That's fantastic. That's the takeaway. So the idea is that when you're doing your science and your engineering and your PhD supervisor is telling you to focus on this, that in the back of your mind now is the idea, well, what about the social impact of this? That you can go and look and see what's on the marketplace at the moment, what do people actually want? Are there different types of people for this? Who will buy this technology? And that's the crucial thing which we're all expected to do, which is different from the past. And that's a fantastic output. So thanks for that. Any other lessons from the back, from the group at the back? Okay, so the guys from Ulster, what did you learn from yesterday? The microphone.
Tap. Yeah, there was a huge amount was covered yesterday, and I'm still doing my best to remember it and process it. But just with a brief discussion with the guys here, there's a variety of facts. You know, the size of the problem, even in Brazil, 3 million kids, which is twice the population of Northern Ireland, with diuretic disease and failing to thrive. And that's just blew me away, really. In situ microscopy was very cool. You know, so there's some technical things that were quite neat. But just in our discussion right now, it becomes clear that, you know, if one of your colleagues comes into your office and says, "Did you get that done yet?" They haven't got your buy-in, and there's no red carpet. So the end user buy-in to any technological solution that is developed is absolutely vital, because you got to get the people that starting feedback here. You got to get the people that are going to use and hopefully benefit from the technology to be fully aware of the fact that it is a useful thing for them, rather than just saying you must press the big red button and wear the necklace.
I think that's a very important point, because when we went to London to GCRF, there were 4 of us went to try to convince the funders to get the money. There were 12 people sitting in a circle asking us questions, but they assumed the science and the technology was fine. So what they focused in on was the social side of it. When we were sitting going, we thought we were going to be asked about technology, about these advanced techniques and processes, but they asked about the social side of it. Have you engaged with people and stuff like that? So the important point is that for scientists and engineers, it's really important that you appreciate, I think, that funders expect you to go an extra bit, an extra mile, we say, to engage with who's going to use this stuff. That's the bottom line. Our colleagues from Columbia, any lessons learned from this group? We've said it all already. Any thoughts? Any, Pilar?
We were talking about water, but other issues appear like management of waste, and of course energy is an issue. So no matter what the problem is, when it's generic and affects the whole society, we need TD no matter what, and we have to stop thinking isolate from the academic side. So it's like it's very complex to work like that, but we need to face all the problems following the TD. It's not only the social engagement, but it's also working with all the elements, the logistics, the architectures, technologies, scientists, pure science, everything has to be involved.
And that's part of the, I mean, I'll talk about this tomorrow, but one of the things about the United Nations water development reports that have been published over the last 15 years is they've gone from simply measuring problems to looking at nature-based solutions, which have been on the go for thousands of years, to looking at ways in which, you know, people can look at different levels of analysis. So the idea that the water problem is simply a technical problem is wrong. I think it's a social and a multifaceted problem. That's what my perception is. So many thanks for that. I mean, I'm getting a signal to wrap up. I've done one slide out of 20. So I'll just show you one other slide. This is a very interesting part. Has anybody heard of this writer, Max Neef? Anybody read his work? Max Neef is a Chilean of German extraction who's written about sustainable development, and he talks about TD, and he makes the point that you can deconstruct a problem into multiple levels. So you have these levels at the bottom, which are empiricism, measuring things, what is, right? So that's the explanation of things. And then you can go up to different levels, engineers, planning, design, politics, up to ethics and values. So this is the explanation of things at this level. This is the significance of things. So for water, for example, the significance is it a human right? Do you have to pay for water? Should it be free? And that's a different thing. So those issues influence all subsequent issues. And that's the power of TD. So Max Neef is a very, very interesting person who tries to look at problem solving as a multi-leveled process. Now, scientists sitting here will say, right, that's it, very interesting, Mike, but how's that relevant to me? In terms of demonstrating impact, if you can link what you're doing up one level, you're demonstrating innovation because you're going between different levels of analysis of a problem. So for PhD people, you can work within your area, but to demonstrate innovation in your discipline, linking in with another level is a very effective way of demonstrating, pushing the boundaries of your discipline, basically. So this is what we're working on at the moment. We're working on a study of what is water innovation studies, and we tried to take these ideas and put down categories of questioning. So you can see at the bottom level, it's what exists, and these are the disciplines you saw in the previous diagram. And how it's dealt with is through empiricism. You measure things, and that's things like water quality. So for the people in the group, water quality is at this level. You can do another level, which is what are we capable of doing? Not what exists, what can we do? And that's about how we plan things through engineering, commerce, architecture. It's pragmatic, and things like water infrastructure. Another level of problem solving could be, what do we want to do? And that's planning, law, management, norms of society. What is normal for our society? Should it be that people cannot have access to drinking water? Is it a norm that we pay for water? And that's about water management. Right up to the top level, which is about what should we do? What is the right thing to do in a civilized society? Which is about our values and the idea of water rights. So the water challenge, as Pilar said, can be seen at multiple levels of analysis for the same water challenge. And if we go between these, that's where interesting work takes place. Okay, so that's my 3 slides, and I'd like to finish. So any last questions from anybody about that social side of water research? Okay, so you give us a couple of minutes. Luis is going to now talk about the experience of CTA, and so just give us a couple of minutes to pull this up. So thanks very much for that. Thank you.